What's up, people? Hey, Damien Rufis here, and we're back again with another. This is a little different show today, but a much needed show that we have today. I'm here with the founder of Max Rhymes Foundation, Todd Courtney, and Elizabeth Noel, the director of education for the Max Rhymes Foundation. Now, I got introduced to Max Rhyme by a buddy of mine, Dave Statler. He was doing some work with these guys, and the work that I saw them doing was incredible. The things that they're doing with kids in schools, kids that look like you and me, it's a little different than the normal programming that we all go through when we go to the public education system. So I wanted to have them here today to talk a little about the work that they're doing with Max Rhymes and how they're going to and how we're all going to help make a difference bring these kids up. Now, let me, Todd, give you a little bit of background of why you started Max Rhymes, or why you felt compelled to do this.
How much time we got, Damien? Because there's a lot of depth to that. First of all, let me start by saying this. I am certainly not the poster child for being a children's author. If my, I wouldn't say elementary school, if my middle school teacher, English teacher, knew I was doing this, she would be utterly shocked. This was something that started for me, it was 2006, and it wasn't that I was on this path at all. I was an insurance broker. I'd sold insurance my entire life. And as such, I was just not fulfilled. That's probably the best way to put it. On the outside, life looked great, right? You've got the beautiful house, the white picket fence, the beautiful wife and kids, the dog. And so everything is wonderful. But there was something missing. I just kept saying, this can't be it. This can't be what life is about. You make more money and you buy a bigger house, or you buy bigger cars, or this can't be it. So in 2006, I just looked up and I said, God, give me something else to do with my life. And it becomes a be careful what you wish for story. And because slowly what happened, I bumped into a book and then another and then another. I became this voracious reader of what I call, or what I stole from Wallace D. Wattles, which is called thinking stuff. And those books, in a matter of just a couple of years, completely transformed my life. I became a better father, a better husband, a better boss, a better friend. I doubled my insurance business in 5 years, what originally took me 20 years to build. And I just said, wow, I have to share this somehow. I got to figure out how to share this newfound knowledge. And Jackie, my wife, as an elementary school teacher, said, why don't we write children's books? And at the time, I rejected the notion, thinking, I don't want to write children's books. I want to help people. That's the path I was on. Till one fateful night, we were both reading in bed, and I was reading this book called Biology of Belief on epigenetics. Stuff people read for fun, right, Damien?
Sure. I got a couple of books over here.
Right. I never heard of them. I never heard of epigenetics. But in the middle of that book, I hit something on brain waves, and I'm going, oh my gosh, Jackie, you're right. And I made her read the page. We have to write children's books, and here's why. And it had to just do with programming. We're all programmed based on where we grow up, the schools we grow up going to, the coaches that we have, the parents and the family that we have. No matter what, it's just programming. And when I found out from that book that only 1 out of 10 adults really ever changes their programming, meaning you just get trapped, and it's extremely difficult. And I know firsthand because I'm still working on myself, changing myself, and I inundate myself with these books to reprogram myself. And we didn't know what we were doing. It's like a lot of this stuff, we just fumbled into it. And so that's the shortest condensed version of how it happened, purely by accident.
Elizabeth, how did you get involved, or how did you come across Max Rhymes?
It was a pure miracle. Basically, my director, my boss over myself, found Max Rhymes online when it was more on the retail side rather than the initial foundation. And I just decided I was going to call the author, because I was at that time the director of a summer program funded by a grant. And we had very limited funds, as you hear across the country. I've been in public education all of my life. I don't tend to leave public service. The passion for literacy, getting literacy in the hands of young children, has been a goal of mine personally. I called Todd and talked at quite length about how poor we are and how I would love for him to give me a discounted version of his Max books. That's a shortened version of how we met through the phone.
Told you, I used to be in public education. I was a sixth grade teacher in a school here or a couple of schools here in Arizona. So I do know the plight of being in those situations, the money that isn't there, and how much these kids really need it. Now, Todd, tell me, what is the foundation do? We talked a little about the book, and we'll come back to the book in a little bit, but what does the actual foundation do?
So what we do is we provide, simply put, we contact and get a hold of kindergarten teachers, and specifically kindergartners. And this is from trial and error. When we first carpet blanketed this, we did pre-K, kinder, first grade, but then we go, wait a minute, what do we do next year? So we needed the logistics to work out and the processes and procedures. And we also wanted to capture those early brainwaves that I learned from Dr. Bruce Lipton's book. So we adopt the teachers, we provide every one of their students in that school of kindergartners. So if it's one teacher and there happens to be 4, we're adopting all 4. And so every student gets a full set of 5 books of the Max Rhymes series. In addition, they get our activity books as well, which there's over 650 pages. And they get these throughout the year so they can continue to blend the activities, which are learning activities and fun. There's coloring, there's dot to dot, there's mazes, but there's also word problem solving, there's math, and there's writing. And so you're just blending this with the books and the lessons written in the books. So everybody, the goal is to then hit as many schools as we can in these same demographics, if you will, the same underserved communities. So that way, if kids are playing at a park, and maybe they go to 2 different elementary schools, but they're close and they're in that same demographic, they're all being exposed to Max Rhymes. And then we call it although we plan to do this in perpetuity, we call it a 13-year pilot program, because that takes a 5-year-old as a kindergartner to an 18-year-old senior in high school. And when we get every kid, hopefully, in those neighborhoods, then everyone over that 13-year period will be exposed to the same extracurricular lessons of Max Rhymes.
Nice. Now we'll hop into the content in a second because I want to touch on that. But just a quick story about the kindergartners. Once a year, we would do like a classroom switch for half a day because we couldn't do it for a whole day, where the younger teachers, like the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, would come up to middle school. I taught 6th. So we would swap classrooms for a morning. Let me tell you, I couldn't wait to get back to my older kids because I couldn't be in those classrooms and they couldn't wait to get, because the middle school age kids, they're a little grumpy sometimes. They're a little rowdy, but those little guys, man, I couldn't do it. It takes a certain passionate person to do that work. And my grandmother was and the reason why I went into education, my grandmother was a teacher for Head Start for 30 years. That kind of was why I took that direction. Now, hopping into the account, what is in the books for Max Rhymes? What is it about these books? What's in there that's going to help these little guys?
The magic, I guess you could say. I'll say it like this. I'll start it like this, because most of my generation remembers Humpty Dumpty. You remember that nursery rhyme, Damien?
Yep, sure do.
Okay, so here we are 50, 60 years later, and we still remember Humpty Dumpty. I can recite the whole thing. And the reason we created rhymes is because of Humpty Dumpty. It hit me that if we can make a rhyme that is sticky in the brain, it's sticky in the subconscious mind, that lasts literally forever, but we can bake a positive affirmation. And I'll tell you what, just so some of the audience may not know what affirmation is. An affirmation is simply just a statement, a positive statement said in the present tense. So our books will never say, I wish, I want, or someday. Everything is baked around I am. This is who I am. This is what I do, and so forth. So we'd say those positive statements, like, for instance, in our Be Responsible Like Max books, I am the one who's responsible for me. When I look in the mirror, it's easy to see. So it's a statement of fact baked into a rhyme that these children will remember in their subconscious literally forever. Just remember, we remember Humpty Dumpty, but it'll be these kind of messages. And We know they work because we have over 500 five-star reviews on the website, and we have so many testimonials from parents who, after reading the book once, twice, three times, it doesn't take 20 or 50 times, literally sometimes after once or a handful of times they've read the book, these children already emulate what Max is doing, making his bed in the morning, brushing his teeth, getting his backpack in order. That's a short compilation of why and how the magic works. Outside of that, to the layperson, they're just simple, cute books with a positive message.
Nice. Now, Elizabeth, sometimes there's a little disconnect between people who write the books and the people who are actually delivering the content or seeing the results from the book every day. This isn't the case with Max Rhymes, but what I want to ask you is, with you being in those classrooms with those kids, how do you think this is hitting them or reaching them?
So from my vast many years of experience, Max Rhymes books is absolutely the highest quality of an integration of two important goals for kindergartners, our young learners. First of all, it is the instilling self-worth and the character traits that we want all of our children to have, to develop absolutely in-depth inner social emotional wellness. That's number one. You have to have that social awareness and self-worth to move on into academia. So cognitive growth for kindergartners, that piece of phonemic awareness, the rhyming, onset, phonemic parts of reading, this is why we adopted Max Rhymes twofold. And we absolutely have the data to prove that it's instrumental, this series, in helping our students grow.
That's perfect. Give me one example, because somebody's going to say, hey, it's great in theory that these things are supposed to happen, but give me something that you've seen that actually sparked this whole thing for you, right? You saw it in a kid, because that's how it happens for me, right? I'll see something or somebody take a step and I'll be like, okay, yeah, I know exactly what's working. So tell me about a time you saw that and that happened for you.
I'll go back to another important piece of creating a learning atmosphere for our students. I'm speaking personally. We integrated Max Rhymes into a giveaway book for families. If they would come to our family engagement on Tuesday evenings, and it was a struggle for them to get transportation to do that. We worked on that as well. Max Rhymes was such a success with families and getting those free materials for our families who could not afford to buy a set of books. Maybe a Dollar Tree book would be in their repertoire, in their library, home library, but to get an entire set of Max Rhymes, I saw families dedicated to those goals just through that book series. They wanted to be there. They wanted their children to have these books.
Nice. So now, for me, being in the classroom, I spent a lot of my own personal money taking care of we did things a little different in my classroom. We had a little bit of, we did the fun field trips and had the books and had the stuff. It didn't come from my teacher's salary, I can tell you that. But it's difficult for the school cycle, the getting into a school, you got to get in there almost a year before sometimes. But what I like about the foundation, and folks, I'm a supporter to the Max Rhymes Foundation. I give monthly, as I see on my credit card statement, to Max Rhymes. I bought sets of these books for customers of mine, and them having children have books out to them. So I'm a strong supporter of what they're doing over at the foundation. How many schools, or first of all, before we say how many schools you're into, how do you make it work? Because the math is the math at the end of the day. Like, how do you make this work? How do we get more books in schools?
Wow. Okay. All right. First, let me go back to one of the original questions you asked Elizabeth, because it's going to partly answer this question. Because Elizabeth gave you the really short answer, and I'm going to give you the scary answer for me. when she asked me for 2,000 books and wanted me to pay shipping and didn't have a guarantee that I could get paid. She was hoping for a grant to come in. And I'm like, what? This kind of goes in line with your question, Damien. Is that how do I do that? But something inside of me said, do it. And so I did. And I felt like I've been led on this path. It sounds strange, but I asked. And so anyway, we did. And then shoot, it's been 5 years now. But at that time, I remember going, wow, it's 3 years. We've given her over 6,000 books. And we've touched over 1,200 students, if I recall is what it was. And they've always got the grant. They've always paid me. And so I'm glad I went off those instincts. And so then from that alone, I said, Elizabeth, and she told me she was going to be retiring out of the school district in North Carolina. And I said, we have happened to have an opening as a director of education for our nonprofit, and you would be perfect to take this nationwide. And so she gladly accepted, thankfully. And we are literally, I think we are in virtually every school in her county of Winston-Salem, every elementary school. They absolutely love it. And we've been growing exponentially ever since. So,
may I interrupt that not one single feedback from anyone that Todd and I have touched personally, either through email, principal, kindergarten teacher, counselor, has anything negative to say about Max Rhymes. They just want more and more. We're developing lesson plans, da da da. So it's really spreading quickly.
That's awesome.
So Damien, and to dive deeper in your answer, our director of development, Dave Statler, your friend, he and I went through every single cost, all the way down to the length of tape we were using and quantifying that. And so the full set, that when we adopt a student, it is exactly $22.28 per year. We have it down to the penny. And originally, Jackie and I used our own money. We had fundraisers at her house, and we received some funds that way. We did a lot of trial and error to figure out how best to do this. And it just was a passion project that became all consuming. And we just kept putting one foot in front of the other. Sometimes, as you know, you go 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But it doesn't mathematically pay, except when you quantify what Elizabeth tells us and gives us statistical data that their school district did on the books, then it does quantify. And we are helping these children for literally pennies, fractional pennies on the dollar from what government spends to help people. Probably the best way to say it.
That's amazing. That's amazing, because sometimes it's not about the money. It's about the journey and what you're doing for these kids. And I 100% love that answer. Now, how many schools are you just in Winston-Salem, North Carolina? How many schools are you in?
28.
28.
And we have 44 schools, and that is, out of those 44 schools, we have what is deemed below or at the line of proficiency as dictated by our state and our federal guidelines. So that is very significant in what our data shows, that the growth of the children that we served in our summer program, that cute little book series that we love so much has made such an impact.
Elizabeth, I'll ask you, what are the goals going forward? So you've seen it work in a community. How do you get this? What are the goals of the foundation to get this thing nationwide?
We've already moved to Virginia based on just some personal contacts that Todd and I have met. So word of mouth right now, but we would love to market more. I would love to see Max Rhymes into every single nationwide public or private school to serve kindergartners. That's a lofty goal, but I think it can be done.
And I'll ask you, how do we make that happen?
We've already spent the last 5 years in heavy R&D mode, research and development, and creating processes and procedures. We spent a lot of time doing this when we were piloting the program at first for the first 3 years, and then COVID stopped everything when nobody was going to school, so we couldn't get in. And that actually did us a favor, because at the time, Jackie and I were literally boxing up books, putting them in my truck, driving them to San Jose, driving them to Oakland. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, how are we going to scale this? Obviously, we can't drive all around the country to do this. And so we needed to figure out those processes and procedures. And COVID stopping us in our tracks really helped us because we had a year and a half to figure that out. And then connectivity. And so far, now we're in over 11 states, 78 schools, and 257 teachers that we're adopting. And we now have a waiting list because we're getting to a point where we're waiting on the printing to come in. And now we're getting into the grant modes. I was pretty dead set on funding this predominantly ourselves. Obviously, I can't do it forever. I'd go broke. But I didn't feel comfortable asking people for money, donors, grants, until I really had the fundamentals down as a model. And now that we have the fundamentals down really well, we can now scale. It's really about dollars and cents. The more dollars we raise, the more hands we can get these in. And we have some expansion projects we're working on right now to help do that. But at this point, it's about spreading the word. It's about talking to you, Damien, on this podcast. Because now that we have a toehold in these schools and these teachers, they just keep telling their friends. And we're not saying no. We're just saying, if you ask us to be adopted, we'll pretty much adopt you. And so that's it. So right now it is about marketing, and the overall goal is exactly what Elizabeth said. We would, in a dream world, we'd love to have every kindergartner's hands on these books, but one step at a time.
Elizabeth, let me ask you, is there any statistical data that shows that these are actually helping kids?
Absolutely. With the grant funding the majority of our money, we had a statistician that tracked pre and post data with literacy skills and social emotional wellness. So just an overall viewpoint at the summary, with repeated measures, they showed a large statistically significant improvement from the pre to the post, such as in areas of rhyme recognition, rhyme production. And we're talking about blending phonemes, for example, a 20% growth over a 4 to 5 week time period, which is phenomenal if you think of how children learn and how many days it takes to actually acquire a skill from the pre to the post in a normal school year. Also, a basis for our foundation work, especially during COVID, was to increase wellness and peer interaction, social problem solving, and attending and engaging to a task, such as what's necessary to learn to read. This also showed a 20 to 25%, in some cases a 30% increase from the previous testing done at the beginning of the summer to the end. And keep in mind, it's a 4 to 5 week program. And in essence, a 16 to 20 day gap. And that increase, I think, is very significant as an educator.
So think about that, Damien. When you're talking about a 5 week program, we're getting double to triple digit improvements in a 5 week program, which actually gives me goosebumps every time she tells me these numbers. And that's why our big push is because I'm like, wow, if you can get those statistical improvements in that short a period of time, what can we do in an entire school year?
So may I add the parts? Everything works together. So when you pre-design a program that especially meets the needs of individual children and not what Todd has heard me say, a store-bought plan, when you have a team of educators that are allowed to develop and use high-quality materials, Max Rhymes is the puzzle piece that we needed for family engagement, for literacy intervention, for the character development that we were hoping to instill in the children over the summer. That actually was built into our curriculum, into our day as a read aloud, and also social emotional lesson plans during what we call the morning meeting. If you sat in a kindergarten room, you know about morning meetings, Damien. That's kind of get the day going. You give positive input for the children. You do those, I guess, literacy letter sounds. You probably remember all that from
Yep.
your one day experience, right? There's a plan.
Yep.
There's a plan. It is like a puzzle with kindergartners. Everything has to be integrated and be relevant for those children to actually have it put in that little brain that is so much absorbing everything around the child at that age. If a lot of our students, and I think you can probably relate to this, a lot of our students would come to us never having been read to. When you miss that phonological piece in your life from age 3 to 5, science tells us that brain research that Todd spoke to you about earlier, that's significant loss already before you become a kindergartner.
Wow.
And Damien, let me expand on that because it reminded me a couple of things. One, when Elizabeth first contacted me, she told me, I remember this, she had spent 3 years trying to find books that fit this mold for a law that North Carolina had on social emotional learning for kindergartners, but there were none until she found ours serendipitously through a friend who found us on like Facebook or something. And then Elizabeth has taken it upon herself. They did that whole study unbeknownst to us. We did not know we were going to get into schools in this manner, but Elizabeth and her team of educators have created the lesson plans for teachers to use around the country. We have them on the website. And then they simplified them because I told her, I said, I don't understand these. I'm not an educator.
Yeah.
I don't know how to read these. So can we do it for the layperson, the parent? And so they're doing videos in both English and Spanish on lesson plans on each of our books, just from Elizabeth's team and her dedication to help children.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember trying to take some of that from, I had came up with a plan for lesson plans around fantasy football. So I've gone through the process of the painstaking process of trying to write everything down to get it approved. That's incredible, Elizabeth, that you guys were able to do that.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of exciting plans going forward too, Damien. I'm working with a counselor in the district of which I just retired from, but counselors are very interested in Max Rhymes as well. We have several that have adopted this as part of their program with kindergartners because there's really nothing for kindergartners as this efficient as Max Rhyme. Just FYI.
Nice. So Todd, why is this so important to get out? And we understand the financials behind it, right? There's school districts who have way more money and who can come in and buy all the Max Rhymes books because they know how important it is for their kids. But why is this important for the districts that don't have the money? Like, why is it important that we get the Max Rhymes books into the hands of those kids?
It started when we were doing some retail work, and Jackie and I went to trade shows to get the books into retail stores, and we did. We quickly got into over 100 stores in 9 months. But what we realized was most of the books were falling into the hands of privileged, wealthier people that go out and shop at these kind of high-end boutique stores. And it just dawned on us that really wasn't our intention. It's not that everybody doesn't need them. Wealthy people need to learn manners and have personal responsibility as well. The difference is many of the people that are educated are being taught these. And so our focus was predominantly in the underserved. Jackie served at a Title I school, and she was spending, when we first got married, she was spending upwards of $2,000 a year on her classroom. I've taken a recent poll with our teachers that we've adopted, and the average is between $1,500 and $2,000 a year they spend on their classroom. And that's not sustainable. They don't make enough money to be able to do that yet because they have a passion for the job. They will, and they do. So we feel like it's extremely important to help those in the underserved communities. We were at a school called Carl Monkey Elementary in Oakland. Our director of development, Dave, was with us. And the principal told us her budget was like $250 for the school for the year. We're just like, what are you talking about? It's crazy. And another teacher at MLK Elementary School, one of our first pilot schools in Oakland, had said, many of these kids don't have food at home, let alone books. So I get goosebumps as I say it. And I've said this story 1,000 times and I still get goosebumps. There's no faster and more surer way to change a child's life, but to have them be able to read, have confidence, believe in themselves, respect themselves. Because once they respect themselves, they will respect those around them. When that happens, the bullying diminishes, the backstabbing diminishes, and everybody can have and live in a cohesive environment. And it just felt like for us, Jackie, again, being a teacher at Title I school, that was just the most important. Those demographics were the most important for us to start at, and then allow it to grow, and then move into areas where people can afford them on their own.
Right. Now, if I'm a kindergarten teacher or I'm a school administrator or I'm a grandmother or grandfather who has a kid in kindergarten, how do I learn more about the Max Rhymes Foundation and how can I help?
So the first thing you could do is you go to the maxrhymesfoundation.org website. That details exactly what we do. If people financially want to help, there's a page on there on donate. There's a page on how to adopt a classroom, how to adopt a school. It tells them exactly what the cost is. It's $22.28 a student. We don't pay ourselves any salary. We have no fluff in here. Everything is pure expense built in. And then if they want the books themselves, maybe it's a grandparent who just wants to get them for their grandchild, they can buy them on our nonprofit retail site at maxrhymes.com.
Perfect. Todd, thanks for hanging out with me today. Elizabeth, a pleasure. I really look forward to Max Rhymes, seeing this thing across the nation, getting into all the schools. We appreciate you guys coming on today.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.